Before too long, they landed on a large pad somewhere deep in the ship. The pod's door slid open. Prime Eternity stepped out, followed by Alia and Viv. Immediately Prime was mobbed by attendants and advisors, who all shouted to get her attention. Eternity. You must look at the situation in. The vote for the fleet increase is tenuous eternity, if you were. You must determine the. Prime ignored them all, striding forward as the people shoaled around her. Alia and Viv followed behind, ignored. They approached a gate, a real metal gate, and Prime finally turned towards the attendants, her face not quite glaring, but on the way towards a glare. Leave us. I will answer your questions later. Enter. But you, one of them started to say before Prime backhanded them. Unlike Dr. Yanaz, they did not know how to move with the hit, and were knocked to the side. As one, the attendants took a step back. I will answer your questions and make the necessary decisions later. Prime hissed. I have guests, and I must attend to them. She looked at Alia and Viv. Come. As she turned towards the gate, the metal swung open silently, opening just enough for the three of them to enter. Alia looked behind as they walked in, and she saw two of the attendants helping up the one that Prime had hit. If you need to take care of matters of state, Alia said, Viv and I can wait until you're finished. It sounds like they need you. Nima, why? They always sound like that. The state has run itself for more than 3,000 years. A few more hours won't hurt anything. Prime said and looked where Alia was looking. They know better than to talk back. When Eternity speaks, she is to be obeyed. You'll be fine. No, so. And if he's not? Alia asked. Prime looked at Alia oddly. There are millions more where he came from. If he is not fine, he will be replaced. She turned back and continued down the path towards the palace. Alia took the time to look around and take in her surroundings. She could hardly believe that she was on a ship in space. There were plants and trees, real trees, all around. The ground was stone pavers, and overhead a bright light gave the appearance of sunlight. There wasn't a blue sky, but that was the only concession to being inside a ship. The path wound gently around in order to give the appearance of being larger than it was, and as they rounded the corner, she saw the palace. It was a large stone building with a high roof and gold trim. Alia marveled at the excess. When she had been training, it had been impressed that space travel was expensive, and that every square centimeter of space would have to be utilized, ideally for more than one use. Here, they had space for a garden, a palace, and what seemed to be an entire city in space. How many people lived and worked aboard Alternative Solution? She would have to ask. As they entered the building, the large double doors opened for them, and a crew of people lined either side of the atrium, bowing at the waist as they entered. Prime ignored them all, walking through the palace until they reached her private rooms. Not knowing what else to do, Alia and Viv followed. As they passed the threshold to her private rooms, Prime began stripping her uniform off. Jacket, shoes, pants, shirts. She had stripped completely down to underclothes while mid-stride. A moment later, she removed them as well and grabbed a large white robe that was on a hook right where she stopped. She wrapped herself tightly in the plush robe and sighed. That's better. Alia turned back to Viv only to see her bright pink in a blush and looking at the floor. Prime apparently noticed as well and scoffed. Please, Major, we're in my home. Of course, I would like to be comfortable. She clicked her fingers and 2 more robes were placed on hooks. You may avail yourselves if you wish as well. Viv said, and swallowed. That is very generous, Prime Eternity. But I think I will be more comfortable in my uniform. I could order you, Prime said, raising an eyebrow and moving towards an overstuffed couch. Viv nodded and kept her head down. You could, Prime Eternity. Shall I put on a robe? Oh. Alia opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, Prime waved her hand dismissively. But I won't. Please remain dressed in what you are comfortable with. She looked at Alia. And you? I'm fine. Alia said, though she did unbutton the top of her shirt, take off the sash, and tugged at the collar. Now that we're away from everyone, can you tell me your number? Of course, 27. I am 585. Thank you, 585. I must admit that number is higher than I anticipated. How many of us are there? Dern. The answer to that question is, unfortunately, up for debate. 585 said, leaning back. She touched something on her wrist, and a moment later, a steward appeared with a bottle of bourbon, a carafe of tea, 3 mugs, and 3 crystal cups. They set it down on the table between everyone, bowed and left silently. 585 immediately poured herself a healthy measure of bourbon, while Alia took a mug of tea. She offered the carafe to Viv, and 585 shook the bottle of bourbon at her. Alia could see that Viv was weighing the decision, but eventually put up her hand, gently, declining. Prime took another gulp, and continued. There are the original 133, your cohort. Then, more of us were made in groups of 200, every few centuries as needed until we got to 800. That seems straightforward enough, Alia said, sipping her tea. She did not mention that Tontine had told her there were only 630 duplicates. 585 nodded, finished the rest of her bourbon, and poured another. It would be, if that was all it was. But people being people, some decided it would be nice if they had their yawn eternity. Someone they could order around and be more pliable. At some point in our history, the means and code to create us was stolen, and she tossed back the bourbon. Knockoffs were made. Knockoffs, Alia said, and took a sip of tea as 585 poured more bourbon. She seemed to be in a hurry to get drunk. Yeah, you know. She gestured with the glass, the amber liquid inside sloshing dangerously close to the edge. Us, but not us. That's why I had you scanned when you came aboard. I wanted to make sure you were who you said you were. She downed the bourbon, and then threw the glass between Viv and Alia, smashing against a wall behind them. Which I wouldn't have needed to do if someone hadn't woken you up, she shouted, her face red with drink and rage. Eternity. I was only, Viv said, all the color draining from her face. You were only what? Doing my will. Nowhere does it say my will is for you to find one of us. Wake them up and try to parade her before me expecting some kind of prize. Viv trembled in the seat opposite Prime Eternity. 585 seemed to have realized she had broken her glass, and took another. 585. Viv didn't mean any disrespect by waking. Alia said, putting her mug down. Oh, she's in Viv now, is she? And I suppose she calls you Alia. 585's expression was dark. I didn't realize that you two were so familiar. I would never presume, Viv said. At least you remember some of your lessons, 585 said, and poured her bourbon with the exaggerated motions of someone who is drunk, but trying not to look it. Why did you wake 27? We came across her ship when we were doing a scan of the system, and we had detected an unusual energy reading, so I ordered the Hulk brought aboard in case it contained anything, or anyone important. We discovered Eternity's hibernation cabinet, and fearing that she needed help, we woke her. I promise Prime Eternity, everything I do in your name for you. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. Viv was babbling at this point, clearly on the edge of panic. And yet, you seek elevation. Why else would you have the temerity to reach out to me, J-Personal-A, to alert me about 27's existence? There were plenty of other ways to report back. You? Yes, but it was Eternity, Viv said, pleading. Once I knew who we had found, I thought that you or your sisters would be the people to alert. Not some, even frightened. Viv managed a sour expression, underling. Alia held out a hand to stop. 585. You are being too hard on Viv. I have seen her in action. She is utterly loyal, and has done everything she can to make my experience, bewildering as it can be, comfortable. She should be praised, not punished. Praised? Failing to follow protocol leads to chaos. 585 said, and took a deep breath. Still, the words of eternity carry weight, even one so far out of touch with the here and now. She brought the glass to her lips, but before she drank, she smiled. I know how to resolve this. The color had not returned to Viv's face, but the shaking had stopped at least. Given how Viv herself treated her reports, Alia would not be surprised if a beating or worse was in 585's plans. I am yours, Eternity, Viv said, swallowing again. Command me. 585 shook her head. You're not Shamanai anymore. She pointed at Alia. You report to 27 now. 585 glared at Alia. You wanted to protect her so much. Fine. Ye. She's your responsibility now. You keep track of her. You give her orders. She does not, and will not, report to me. I. Viv stuttered. Of course. She turned to Alia and made that worshipping gesture again. I am yours, Eternity. Alia turned to 585. What's all this? You want to get up to speed on the world today and how it works? Fine. Ye. She, 585's, made a brushing gesture with her hand. We'll help you. Okay, but, well. Before Alia got the opportunity to finish her thought, something flashed in the corner of her vision, and Tartarus activated unconsciously. Immediately everything around her slowed and she was given time to assess the situation. There was a knife soaring through the air, aimed straight at 585. A long throwing knife with a white handle that looked like it was made of bone was slowly traveling towards her sister. By her expression, 585 hadn't even noticed it. Her mouth moving so slowly to form words, and her eyebrows just beginning their climb in question about what Alia was doing. With the time afforded by Tartarus, Alia took a moment to follow the knife's trajectory back to its source. Person clad all in black, with a black mask over their face, had just completed the throw. Alia could see their weight shift as they turned to escape. Willing her muscles to move faster, she ignored the warning twinges from her muscles and ligaments and jumped off the couch. Ignoring the pain, she dove towards the knife and snatched it out of the air. She rolled in midair, too slow, and redirected the energy of the throw back towards the assailant. Tartarus let Alia move very quickly, but physics was physics and the ground was coming up rapidly towards her back. She pivoted her body and thrust her legs down, absorbing the impact. Soft shoes sliding as they tried to find purchase on the smooth floor. After what felt like forever, she finally felt grip, and she pushed off as hard as she could towards the black-clad figure. She took 3 giant steps and leapt towards the assassin. There was a moment when she realized she was going to arrive an instant after the knife did, and she smiled to herself. The knife slid into the shoulder of the assailant, and she speared into them right behind. The hollow noise of their skulls striking the smooth stone floor had a deep, resonant timbre while her perception was slowed. Alia pushed off their tumbling body and righted herself, coming to rest on her feet, and willed her perception back to normal. The assailant tumbled to the ground in an unconscious heap. Viv and 585 stared wide-eyed at Alia, who was panting from exertion. What happened? Viv said, looking at the assassin and then Alia. You moved so fast. Tartarus. 585 whispered. You really do have it. Her eyes went down to the person in a pile on the floor. Who was that? I don't know, Alia said, unable to catch her breath. She reached down and pulled the knife out of the assailant's shoulder, and they groaned. They were alive for now. They were throwing this at you. Alia fell to one knee, her face covered in a sheen of sweat, panting heavier now. Viv jumped to her feet and ran over. Eternity. Are you all right? No, Alia whimpered. I feel really strange. I think I. Viv grabbed her shoulders as Alia tried to stand, but her legs went out from under her, and she collapsed.